All right, welcome everybody. This is a separately recorded version of the Reactive Dog Q&A lecture that was given earlier this year to a group of rescue and foster volunteers. The topic of this session is aggression or fear, and it's a very common topic that we get here at Social Dogs because unfortunately it's a very pervasive issue that we see where dogs behave aggressively in the eyes of people, but maybe we don't understand where that behavior is coming from, and we may not know the difference between truly aggressive intent or behaviors that are just aggressive in our world, in our human world. The presentation that I'm giving now does not have a Q&A section at the end because it's not being given live. It is pre-recorded. Feel free to take notes and listen along. It's going to be a very high level, almost philosophical discussion. It won't give you a ton of specific examples, but we'll go through a few examples kind of near the end on what we can do with more unique cases. So just for background, Social Dogs was founded during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021. During this time, we saw a large number of families struggle with transitioning from a pandemic lifestyle where they were home all the time with their dogs to a back-in-office lifestyle, which was a very rapid change that maybe people weren't fully prepared for. And what we also noticed that people were returning to urban areas after the pandemic, which created a few problems for dogs that were maybe raised without this kind of intense stimuli. Because urban living requires dogs to be highly socialized, with socializing meaning exposure to different kinds of stimuli. We focus on positive, gradual socialization, and that's how we can prevent or fix existing behaviors that are undesirable. So for today, we're going to discuss dogs as a species. Then we're going to go into genetics. And then we're going to go into reactivity and what it actually is. And then a few solutions at the very end. The first question is, what actually is aggression? And how do we define aggression? Is it intent that's aggression, or behavior that's aggression? I'd like to argue that people focus on behavior as aggressive, not intention. Reason being, it's much easier to see and witness aggressive behavior than it is to understand why that behavior is being presented. It's easy to identify aggressive behavior because you don't need the context. If a dog is showing teeth, foaming and barking, or biting, that's aggressive enough for most people's definition. That dog's gotta go, right? But if we understand where that core issue is stemming from, if we understand the true intent, what is the dog trying to say when it's displaying behavior that we think is aggressive, won't we be able to solve that issue? What if it is not actually aggression? What if it's fear? What if it's setting boundaries? What if it's communication? Or what if it's an inherent expression of a genetically pre-programmed desire to do something, like to protect a home, to protect territory, to guard food, to correct a puppy, to express pain? Right? We don't know all those things, right? And so what I'd like to present today is a better way to understand aggression and a better way to identify what is the intent of that aggressive behavior. Dogs as a species are cousins to or descendants of wolf and wolf-like creatures. And in that space, that feral independent species has to hunt live prey, it has to dig, it has to chew, it has to interact with other dogs or other animals of its type. But instead, we domesticate it. We place it in a synthetic world that is completely human created, like a city with cobblestone streets and concrete. We feed the dog kibble, and we give the dog toys like tennis balls and chew toys, and we chain it up with harnesses and leashes and collars, which are highly unnatural in the historical wild world. So dogs are like, okay, for millions of years, I'm catching my own food. What do you mean I can't eat the cat? What do you mean I gotta eat this dry kibble instead, right? Like this tennis ball I gotta chase. You mean I'm not allowed to eat the squirrel? And the same thing with a dog being restrained constantly. A dog's like, I can't go and roam. I have to be within 6 feet of you, stuck to this piece of rope. Right? These are very unnatural positions that we put dogs in. It's not to say the dogs don't love it. It's not to say they're not having fun, but they're definitely substitutes that humans have provided for our dogs. And these substitutes can be used appropriately or inappropriately or completely misunderstood, right? We can use toys to satisfy a dog's desire to chase prey. We can use dog food to, change a dog's behavior and lure them into good positions. We can use harnesses to keep dogs safe. But at the same time, we just need to know when it is appropriate to use them and how we can actually harmoniously use them as real tools to get our dogs fully socialized and not displaying aggressive behaviors. One thing I do want to point out is genetics does unfortunately have a strong effect on the kinds of drives and issues that you'll see within certain dogs. There is a reason why certain dogs might thirst for blood. So the vertical axis shows at the top dogs that are game dogs, prey dogs, dogs that were bred to chase squirrels, raccoons, wild boar, deer, hunting dogs. And then at the very bottom of that vertical line is dogs that are not really bred to hunt and chase. So at the top, you'll see Yorkshire Terriers on the left and American Pit Bulls on the right. Those are game dogs. So naturally, those dogs might have issues where they really want to chase prey. And they might display teeth or a growl or lunge when they're trying to express those behaviors. On the horizontal line, you see on the left side dogs that are very welcoming, welcome to my house. And then on the right side, you see dogs that are like, who are you? Dogs that are very territorial. They take their guardian role very seriously. These are serious protectors. These are serious dogs. And that's why we have Rottweilers and German Shepherds on the right, and then Samoyeds, which are more multi-purpose dogs, on the left. Samoyeds are not necessarily the most prey-driven dogs. They're not necessarily the most protecting dogs, but they're generally an all-around low guarding drive and low prey drive dog. So what you see in the top right-hand corner with the word problems circled in big pink marker, this is why these breeds, these powerful prey-driven or protective breeds like Rottweilers, American Pit Bulls, and German Shepherds are the ones that have a hard time getting placed into adoptive homes, have a hard time getting into foster, have a hard time leaving the shelter, and have a hard time living their full lives out with the family. Meaning they have a high return rate, they have a high failure rate, and these dogs have a high rehoming rate, right? Because these dogs have behaviors that might not vibe with an urban lifestyle or even just human society in general. The things that we have bred them to do, those tasks are no longer required at such a high intensive level, right? It's also kind of the reason why Samoyeds and Beagles, say on the left, are less serious than the dogs on the right. And I'm an advocate for the dogs on the right, or dogs that are whatever breed, but happen to have both high prey drive and high protection instincts. Because those dogs might not necessarily be aggressive. They could be aggressive in certain moments, but it also could be that they are simply driven by genetics to have some predisposition to be suspicious, to really want to chase and shake and bite and destroy things. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just who they are. And that just means for us to own these dogs, foster these dogs, care for these dogs, or rehabilitate these dogs, that we just need to understand what their needs are and to make sure that they have the correct outlet for those needs. They're more than welcome to tear up as many chew toys as they want. They're more than allowed to protect the house, but they don't need to chase the FedEx guy and maul him, and they don't need to eat the cat, right? There are some things that take it a little bit too far. They don't need to do those things. And what we want to do is we want to train our dogs to ignore certain triggers and have at it at other triggers, which are actually important. Because there are times, of course, where we, value and honor these breeds for their talents, right? In hunting or protecting or whatnot. One word that is very popular in the dog training space is reactivity. And what is reactivity, really? In our view, reactivity is natural reactions that our dogs have to triggers, natural behaviors that they display because of inherent genetic predispositions, and repetition, and the wrong context. So this would be an example of a Rottweiler trying to bark and snarl and lunge, protecting its owner when it's simply walking down a street and freaking everybody else out. And the dog does this every day. So the dog's like, well, I guess this is my daily schedule. I drag my owner down the street and I bark at everyone I see. Not great in terms of the context. And now people are labeling that dog reactive, which it is. It is reacting to triggers, but more importantly, it's starting to repeat those behaviors. Same thing for the middle picture here, where we have a German Shepherd chasing after a pigeon off leash, right? There's no need for our dogs to hunt and find their own food, right? There's no need for them to hunt pigeons or eat chickens or eat the cat or eat raccoons, but they still have a prey drive where they want to chase those things. And so we might perceive that dog as being aggressive and dangerous to small dogs or small animals or even small children that behave like prey. But again, it's our responsibility to recognize that this is prey drive gone wrong. This is prey drive in the wrong place, on the wrong target, and totally inappropriate at this time. But there's nothing wrong with prey drive itself. The last slide just highlights aggression towards other dogs, which can stem from a little bit of, it can stem from resource guarding to dominance. There's so many reasons that dogs can be reactive to other dogs or go after other dogs, but essentially that behavior itself is not appropriate, right? We want dogs to be neutral when they see each other. They don't have to be best buddies, but they need to know when it's okay to play, when it's okay to walk by, and when it's okay to just do nothing and not eat the other dog, right? So what we really want to identify is why our dog's doing certain things. Because if you know why your dog is doing something, you'll be able to slip in an alternative. So here we're going to talk a few solutions. Solutions are definitely better than shaming owners. I think the rescue community needs to be aware that sometimes adopters are uneducated, which is fine. Everyone starts somewhere. Everyone has their first dog. Everyone gets bitten at least once. So as a community, our view is that it's always best to ask dog owners, what is the source of the behavior? What are the triggers? And then from there, we think about how we can modify those behaviors or offer alternatives for that dog to do this instead when they feel that urge, in order to prevent things like injury or, insecurity in dogs. So we can go through one of the examples we saw earlier with a Rottweiler being very protective of its owner walking down a street in an urban, busy area. So the very obvious trigger that we can see is strange people walking around. right? That triggers the dog's protective instincts. And Rottweilers are bred to be protective, and we love that about them. But it's really not okay for them to do that when you're walking down the street in a plaza where there are no active threats, right? So the dog looks like it's losing its marbles, and there's just absolutely no reason for it. So in that case, we want to modify that behavior, right? We as owners may believe that the dog is not aggressive to us, but the dog is definitely displaying aggression to others. So what can we offer them instead, right? We could offer them alternating behaviors. We could say, you can bark once to alert me of danger or something in the distance that doesn't seem right, but then after that, you focus on me, right? You can ask your dog to heel. Now, if your dog has an entrenched repetitive behavior and already has developed reactivity, that means the dog has a tendency to keep barking at other people and not listen to you in those moments where they're in drive. In which case, you want to separate the distance, right, between your triggers and kind of work on it one at a time, where one stranger walks by your dog and you let your dog bark once, and then you ask your dog to come and focus on you instead and come heel by your side. This is just an example. There's 1,000 things you can ask your dog to. You can ask your dog, instead of barking at the person, to play with a tug toy. You can ask your dog to focus on you and have a piece of cheese. The way you diagnose an issue, the way you solve a problem, is based on the individual personality of the dog itself. Not every dog cares about cheese. Not every dog cares about food. Some dogs really don't care about tennis balls, and some dogs love them. The item you use to redirect your dog's attention, that item is based on your dog. The solution strategy, however, is the same. The solution strategy is to get your dog to express their desire to protect you, but to offer a behavior that you would prefer. See, that's what we really ultimately want as socialization dog experts, right? We want the dog to do what we think is right. We're not asking the dog to be a different dog. And so that brings a sense of harmony between who the dog is, as well as what is sustainable training. If, for example, you take your dog to board and train, and they're not allowed to bark whatsoever at any person passing by, that's fine. However, what happens when you bring that dog out of the board and train program back into your house, back into your urban apartment complex? You might not see a ton of improvement because your dog is still in the same context that triggered it beforehand. And at the same time, you are also in the same context. You don't live at the board and train facility either, right? So you have to adapt your solutions to the environment that you live in. You must solve the problem that your dog has in the environment you live in. And the solution behavior that the dog is supposed to offer in the end has to be custom to what you would prefer in that situation instead. So if you want your dog to chase the FedEx man, sure, you can just open the door and let your dog have it. But if you would prefer your dog to bark once and then go settle down in his crate and check out, that's also fine too. Obviously, the second option is better. But it's possible to ask your dog to do something else than what they've been doing before, yet not blame them for doing what they're trying to do, right? Your dog is your dog. Your dog has intentions and understandings of the world that may be wrong, but your dog interpreting the world, being allowed to interpret the world, that's not wrong. A dog is allowed to try and understand the world. It's our job to guide them. And through that guidance is how we're able to prevent further issues. So to wrap up this session, we started with what we define as aggression, intent or behavior. Then we talked about dogs as a species. Where do dogs come from? What are their needs? Then we talked about genetics. How have we bred dogs? Why do certain dogs have more problems than others in human society, in a human world? And then finally, how do we deal with repetitive actions that are wrong in the sense that they're the wrong thing to do in this context? And what we propose is to identify the source, then modify your behavior, your understanding, to then modify your dog's behavior and understanding of what to do in these situations. And that's how we prevent true aggression. That's how we prevent real life problems, real life issues where dogs and people can get hurt, right? If you liked this short but theoretical or philosophical overview of how we approach dog training, please check out our online blog or sign up for our newsletter, where we'll let you know once a month when our next live lectures are, when we might have live workshops, and when we have new blog articles where we discuss a little bit more about how to better identify the source and how to actually modify behaviors in dogs that are aggressive. We hope that through this community outreach that we'll be able to increase the success rate of happy dog owners and even happier dogs. Thanks so much, and we hope to hear from you again. Bye.